Okay, people ask me how I do Intarsia. Intarsia is like a jigsaw puzzle. We cut a whole bunch of pieces out of different colored woods and put them together to make a project, a figure, a teddy bear, a bird, or a whole. Use those to make a whole project. In this case, this is a memorial piece that I'm doing for a friend. First we start with our pattern. I already had a pattern for a teddy bear that I modified a little bit to make just a woodsman teddy bear or woodcutter teddy bear. And I already had a pattern for a cardinal, so those I had. But I had to put them together, so we have a woodsman sitting on a log with a cardinal, and this represents some family elders who have passed away. And the guy was a woodcutter, so we did a chainsaw. Really all I had to do to add to the pattern was put them on the log with the chainsaw, add that, and perch the cardinal on a little branch there. But this is where we start. We have to have the pattern, because once we have the pattern, then I can make copies, and I have to cut out each individual piece to make the project. Every little line almost you see in there is where I'm going to make a scroll saw cut. These will all be individual pieces of wood. In the teddy bear alone, there's 47 pieces. The cardinal has about 13 pieces. And then I haven't counted up what I'm adding with the log and the chainsaw yet. So this is where we start. We always start with the pattern. We either have to make a pattern, or we use a pattern we already have, or we can buy a pattern. There are pattern artists out there, and they're much smarter than I am. They're much better than I am. I'm a pretty damn good craftsman, but I'm not an artist. So this is the start of an Intarsia project. Make the pattern. Once we have the pattern, now we can cut things out, fit them together like a jigsaw puzzle. And those steps will be coming along real soon now. I decided not to bore you with a video of me cutting out little pieces of paper. But there's some steps when you're cutting out the pattern to glue onto the wood that need to be stressed. For one thing, some pieces we don't we don't cut every piece of the pattern out completely. You notice the bear's head, I had the whole head here, and that whole head will be glued to a board, and then I'll cut it out. I'll cut the outside of the head with a standard blade, and then I'll use a very narrow blade to cut the inside lines on the head. That way I make sure that all these pieces will fit together very, very tightly. Another example is in the shirt, this plaid shirt. You notice I left all those pieces. These are actually going to be two different colors of wood. And when I cut this, I'll actually layer the two colors of wood on top of one another when I cut the pattern out. That way, when I alternate the pieces of wood, I know they're going to fit perfectly, and it'll look like a very nice fit. So we have the pattern cut out. Now we have to determine what colors of wood we're going to use for what. The teddy bear, I'll probably use a light western cedar wood. The vest, mahogany, kind of speaks up to that. The bear paws, yellow pine or white pine. This part of the hat will be aspen. Of course, the canary will be a redwood. All I have right now is some paddock, so we'll use that for the canary. The tree, I haven't, the log and branch, I haven't really figured yet. The chainsaw, of course, the chainsaw blade needs to be silver gray. I'll use some blue pine for that. The body of it will either be a red or orange wood, probably some more redwood. But anyway, that's the pattern cutout. All the pieces are cut out and ready to be glued to the wood. Oh, when I cut the pattern, I normally group my pattern pieces for the type of wood I'll be using. Like all the paw pieces, ear pieces, will get some yellow pine. All the main pieces of the bear will get western cedar. Some parts of the tree will be one color, some parts of the tree will be another color. And then I take the weird pieces, you know, the chainsaw, or the arm of the chainsaw is going to be black walnut, as will the nose of the bear. But this little hat piece probably should go over there. That'll be some other color besides white. White wood, I'll use aspen. But there it is. Those are the pieces as they're cut out. I wasn't going to bore you with me cutting out small pieces of paper, but there's some points about cutting out the pattern that should be stressed. When cutting out your pattern, we cut out main pieces, say like this bear's head. I cut out the whole head. I didn't cut out every little piece in the head, and that'll get glued to the board, this whole piece. Then we'll cut the shape of the bear's head out, and then I'll use a very narrow scroll saw blade to cut out the individual pieces of the bear. This gives me a better fit on all these pieces when I put the head back together. Same thing like with this plaid shirt. The plaid shirt's actually going to be made out of two different colors of wood. So I'll stack two colors of wood together and glue this on top and cut all the wood at one time. That way when I put them back together, alternating colors for these pieces, I'll get a plaid shirt that fits together very, very well. That's one of the important things about cutting out the pattern. You don't necessarily want to cut every little piece out with the paper and cut every little piece individually. Sometimes we leave big major sections together and cut out each little individual piece with the scroll saw. That way you get a way better fit. Notice I've got these in separate trays. That's because I tend to put pieces for the different types of wood I'm going to use. The main bear parts will be a light western cedar. The paw parts for the bear, that we'll use a yellow pine. The vest speaks to mahogany. The plaid shirt, probably some aspen, maybe a little eastern red cedar. The trees, I'm not sure yet. The hat's going to be white. The canary, of course, is going to be a redwood. All I have is paddock right now, so I'll be using that. And that way, you know, you kind of group your pieces for the type of wood you're using, though. So that's pretty much the thing about cutting out the patterns. You want to cut out all the pieces, but some pieces you just cut out major sections, and then you cut all the individual pieces on the scroll saw. That way you get a hell of a lot better fit. And when you cut your pieces out, kind of sort them out for the type of wood you're going to use. That way you're starting to group things so they'll appear better, and it makes a smoother process. So the next step is gluing the pieces of paper to the board. How do we glue? There's a lot of ways we can glue paper to wood. There's a lot of different glues. In this case, I try to stay away from a permanent spray. There are some permanent sprays out there. 3M makes some, Eileen's makes some. You can buy them at any craft store, Walmart, Kmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. The thing of it is once they're stuck to the wood, they're kind of stuck to the wood. The only way you can get them off is with some mineral spirits or alcohol. You put it on the paper and let it sit and soak, and then it'll peel off. Then you got to clean the wood. And we're going to sand all these pieces of wood to shape. So that's not a critical thing, but it's just extra steps. So if we're going to take extra steps, let's do it the easy way. There's also these little glue sticks. Now these are not your run-of-the-mill school glue stick. Elmer's glue sticks, they're no good. This is a Scotch restickable or repositionable glue stick. I get them online, or I have seen them in some of the craft stores. And you can smear your glue on the back of the wood and you can put it in the piece, and if you don't like where it's sitting, you can peel it maybe once or twice and reposition it till you get it the way you like. So you have those. And then there's a machine. This is probably kind of expensive. We call it, it's made by a company called Xyron, their Creative Station. It's a 9-inch wide, so you can feed a 8.5 by 11 sheet through it. And you'll notice, I hope this is showing up, all this white on white. You notice I've tacked little pieces to big pieces of paper. And I did that with this spray. You don't want to tack them so they're permanent. You just want to, you'll notice I kind of make a little swoosh of the glue, and that's all you want. This isn't a permanent stick because you're going to want to be able to peel that off later. You stick it on there. Now, we'll feed these into the machine. I left my knife over here. We'll feed those big pieces of paper into the machine, and it has repositional glued paper already in it. But it's a very, very, very simple process. Now you got to be sure that your patterns are face up, because you want the glue on the back of the pattern. So those go into the machine just so. We crank the handle and the pattern comes out on the other side all glued up. And we feed all our pieces in like that. And while you can't see that, let's see if I can strip this off here. You gotta get this plastic piece off. And then the big sheet of paper you used as a carrier piece. And that leaves your pattern pieces stuck on this filmy paper. And they are glued and ready to go. It's a very even coating of glue. It's repositional. You can stick it down. No, I don't like it. Stick it and move it a little bit till you get it the grain pattern the way you like. And it's a nice machine. It's a little pricier than just going out to the store and buying a $3 can of spray, but it works very well and I like it. But that's the three main ways of gluing paper to board. And I'm going to finish gluing this up, and then I'll start over and show you how we position the paper on the board. Now we get to where we're gluing pattern on the wood. Just a couple examples just to start. This is where the artsy craftsy parts start, because we want to pay attention to the grain of the wood. Now for the log, I've chosen zebra wood. Zebra wood has a real distinct grain pattern to it. It's kind of rough, kind of coarse. Once I shape it and maybe mark it up a little bit, it'll look like tree bark. And when I glued the pattern pieces to the board, you notice that along the log I've kind of kept a consistency in my pieces. This way the grain sort of matches pretty much all the way along the pieces of log. I didn't want it exact. Log bark isn't exact, but I wanted a little bit of consistency, but not real super tight fit, perfect. And once I mark it up a little bit, like I say, as I'm shaping, I'll put in some detail to make it look like wood bark, more like wood bark. That's the tree. Then, like I said earlier, I'm going to use some western cedar for the teddy bear. Again, we want to pay attention to the grain. You notice if I show you the end grain, how the grain is scooped, kind of half mooned in one direction. As we look at the board, we see nice tight grain here, we see nice tight grain here, and then right along here we see flat grain. And we want to use that feature to the best of our ability. So when I put the head of the bear on there, I'm going to try to center the head of this bear over this flat sawn part of the board. That way, when it comes time for shaping, you're going to get some features in the cheeks. It'll make the cheeks stand out. It'll make the bear look symmetrical, and it'll make for a much nicer presentation. So you notice I'm putting this piece offset. I've got little grain lines to tell me which way the grain goes, and I'm putting the bear on there so that we're making use of those grain lines. Now the rest of the bear pieces aren't really that critical, but we try to keep them in where we can make the best of the grain. The tight grain, when you're shaping, tight grain tends to chip a lot. So I'm going to try to stay kind of in the center of this board. This seems like I'm wasting wood. Don't worry, this wood will get used someplace else. But I'm going to position all my pieces so I'm making use of that center flat grain area. And that way we won't have so much chip out when we're trying to shape and sand these pieces. Western cedar is a very soft wood, and it chips very easily, it breaks very easily, so it's something we have to treat with care. And if we stay away from these tight grains, then it doesn't want to break as much. It doesn't want to break as much as if we were using the tight grains. So that's how we put the patterns on the board. Again, we want to pay attention to the grain and position our piece to make the best use of the grain, so that the grain actually contributes to the piece rather than just be a piece of wood that we use to cut a pattern piece out of. There's no paint or stain here. It's all the different colored pieces of the wood. So we want the wood to be able to speak for itself. And by placing our patterns on here correctly, cutting correctly, and then shaping correctly, that's how we do that. Okay, I said there was a couple of tricks to cutting some of these and gluing patterns on. I have a couple examples right here. In this case, I'm going to work on the checkerboard shirt or check pattern shirt that this guy's wearing. I've decided on Eastern red cedar for my dark wood, aspen for my white wood. The thing about these is I can cut out each individual piece, but I'd have to cut it out of both white and red. I can do that all at once, and I can ensure that I have a better fit of the pieces by just laminating these two pieces together temporarily with some double-sided tape. So basically, it's a case of stick some double-sided tape to the boards. You can get double-sided tape anywhere of different strengths, and there are different strengths of double-sided tape. You want to be careful you don't get something that's too aggressive, because when you're doing small pieces and you have a very sticky tape, it may be hard to pull the pieces apart after you get the tape on there. And I have seen the tape actually break wood when it's too aggressive. So there we go. Now I will cut those all as one. I'll cut the major pieces out, then I'll go to a narrower blade and cut the individual little blocks out. And that way I know everything fits together nice and tight. The other one is a name. They want the name Chuck over the left pocket of the vest. So I have the piece for the vest here. This is butternut. The thing of it is you'll notice I have all the name Chuck backwards on here. What I have to do is I'm going to have to cut out this piece, and then I'm literally going to have to rip it down to about 1/2 inch. In other words, saw it this way. And then laminate some light wood, probably either aspen or a real light pine. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll glue these together, and then I'll cut the name out. But I have to set the scroll saw at an angle. This is called inlay. I could do it with whole pieces, but inlay works better with thinner wood. So rather than get into a lot of detail about that now, I'll come back to it later. I just wanted to give the heads up on what has to be done to get the name and the vest. And that's another method of gluing up and then cutting so we get a precise fit.